Revenge with Ava. The first time they called me intern, I wasn't even in the room. I was in the hallway outside Conference B, holding a tray of coffee I'd paid for myself, because the office card was for directors only. Through the glass, I watched them laugh, smooth suits, polished watches, the kind of smiles that never reached their eyes. My badge said Strategy Associate, but to them, I was a girl in heels who didn't belong. When I stepped in, the laughter didn't stop. It just turned quieter, sharper, like a knife sliding into a drawer. "Set it down, sweetheart," Martin Cole said, not looking up from his laptop. He was the VP of Growth, the golden boy with the perfect hair and the dead eyes. "And grab me another. This is cold." I held the tray a second longer than I should have. Then I set it down without a word. Because in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight them in the room where they owned the air. I was going to take the building from underneath them. My name is Elena Price, and I didn't come to Mercer & Wren to make friends. I came because I'd spent 8 years watching my mother work herself sick for companies that smiled when they fired her. I came because I knew what it meant to be underestimated, to be talked over, to be pushed aside like a chair no one needed anymore. And I came because I had one advantage they didn't. I could listen. The executive meeting was about a merger, a big one, a private cybersecurity firm called Blackgate, lean, profitable, quiet. The kind of acquisition Wall Street loved. Martin led the pitch like a preacher. He stood at the screen, clicking through slides with a confident hand, talking about synergy and streamlining and future-proofing. The words were pretty, the numbers were not. But no one questioned him. Not openly. Because Martin had built a world where doubt was punished. I watched him from the edge of the room, my hands folded tight, my face calm. I made eye contact with no one. I nodded when they looked my way. The perfect little intern. When the meeting ended, I carried the empty cups out, my back straight, my heels quiet on the carpet. Behind me, I heard Martin's voice drop low, smug. "Did you see her? Trying to act like she belongs?" Another voice, Gavin, finance director, snorted. "Let her play dress up. She'll be gone by Q3. I didn't turn around." But my jaw ached from holding myself together. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed in my glass-walled cube until the office lights switched to night mode and the city outside looked like a field of stars. I pulled the Blackgate deck up on my screen and started tracing every line like it was a crime scene. Because it was. The projected revenue curve looked too smooth. The margin improvements were too clean. The expenses were oddly vague. And the debt. The debt was hidden like it was ashamed. I opened the raw data Martin's team had uploaded, and I found the first crack. A set of payments routed through a consulting vendor I'd never heard of, Orchid Advisory, sitting in a place where it shouldn't exist. The amounts were small enough to ignore, but repeated enough to notice. I clicked deeper. Orchid Advisory had no real website, no staff listed, no history beyond 2 years. 2 years. The same time Martin joined the company. My stomach tightened. I ran the vendor ID through our internal system and found the contract had been approved under an executive exception. No competitive bids, no compliance review, just Martin's signature. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, and felt a strange calm settle over me. Like the moment before thunder. In my head, I heard my mother's voice from when I was 14, sitting at our kitchen table with bills spread like wounds. "They don't fire you for being bad," she'd said softly. "They fire you because you're in the way." Martin had been stepping over people his whole life. Now he'd stepped on the wrong one. The next morning, I walked into the office like nothing had changed. I wore a charcoal dress and a simple necklace. Hair pulled back. Makeup clean. Professional. Invisible. At 9:07 a.m., Martin called me into his office. His door was glass, but his blinds were half closed. He liked privacy without losing the chance to be seen. He didn't offer me a seat. He stood behind his desk, sipping espresso like it was power. "Elena," he said, dragging my name out like it was something sticky. "I need you to do something useful today." I kept my face blank. "Of course." He slid a folder across the desk. "Print these. Bind them." "We have board guests at 2. I glanced down. It was the final Blackgate acquisition packet. The one that would go to the board. The one that would get approved. The one that would make Martin's bonus explode. I lifted my eyes. "Do you want any changes made before I print?" He gave a lazy smile. "No, just don't screw it up." As I turned to leave, he added, almost like an afterthought, "And Elena, try not to speak in the boardroom unless spoken to. You're there to observe." I paused at the door. For half a second, I imagined saying everything. Orchid advisory, the fake vendor, the hidden debt. I imagined the room turning on him. Then I imagined the room turning on me. Because I knew how this worked. The truth was dangerous when you didn't have a weapon to hold it with. So I smiled. Understood. I walked out with the folder pressed against my ribs like a secret. Back at my desk, I didn't print a thing. I scanned every page, saved copies off network, and started building my own packet. Not for the board, for the person who mattered most. Diane Mercer. Co-founder. Major shareholder. Quiet legend. She didn't attend weekly meetings. She didn't join happy hours. She didn't laugh at Martin's jokes. She only showed up when something smelled wrong. And lately, she'd been showing up more. I had seen her once in the lobby, silver hair, sharp posture, eyes that looked like they'd already decided what you were worth. When she passed me, she gave me one look. Not dismissive. Curious. Like she'd noticed I was watching. That was my opening. I didn't have her email. Not directly, but I knew someone who did. Her executive assistant, Maya, ate lunch alone in the break room, always with a book open, always with her phone face down like she didn't trust the air. People ignored assistants. They shouldn't. I poured myself tea and walked in like I belonged there. Maya didn't look up at first. I sat across from her, quiet. After a few seconds, she raised her eyes, cautious. "Can I help you?" I kept my voice low. "I think something is wrong with the Blackgate deal." Her expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened on her fork. "That's not something you say out loud." "I'm not saying it out loud," I said softly. "I'm saying it to you." She stared at me, assessing. "Why me?" "Because you work for someone who can do something about it," I said, "and because you're smart enough to know when to listen." A long beat. Then she leaned forward just slightly. "If you're wrong, you'll get fired, I know. If you're right," she whispered, "you'll still get fired. Just slower, I know." She studied my face, then nodded once. "What do you have?" I slid my phone across the table. On the screen, Orchid advisory, payment history, contract approval. Maya didn't touch it at first. She just looked, like looking too long might make it real. Finally, she picked it up, scrolled, and her pupils tightened. She set it back down gently. "Do you have more?" "Not yet," I said, "but I can." Maya's voice was barely a breath. "Diane is flying in tomorrow morning. She's meeting the board at noon." My heart thumped once, hard. Tomorrow. That was sooner than I expected. Maya reached into her pocket and slid me a small card. No logo, just a number. "Text this," she said. One sentence. No names, no details. She'll know. I took the card like it was a match. That night, I didn't sleep. I pulled every vendor invoice tied to Martin's division. I compared timestamps. I traced approvals. I found Orchid connected to 3 other shell vendors, different names, same routing address, same bank. And then I found the real poison. A set of emails, archived but still searchable, between Martin and a Blackgate executive. Subject line, board optics. Inside, a conversation about massaging their reported churn, delaying a breach disclosure until after acquisition. A breach, not a rumor, a documented incident. Hidden. My hands shook as I read it. Because if they acquired Blackgate without knowing, Mercer and Wren would inherit the damage. The lawsuits. The public collapse. Martin didn't care. He wasn't building a future. He was building his exit. At 2:14 a.m., I stared at the glowing screen and felt cold spread through my chest. Then I remembered the way he'd said sweetheart, the way they'd laughed, the way they'd already decided I was disposable. I opened my phone and typed one sentence to the number Maya gave me. The Blackgate deal hides a breach and shell vendors tied to Martin, proof ready. I stared at it for a full minute. Then I hit send. The next day felt like a storm trapped inside a glass building. Everyone buzzed with the board visit. Fresh flowers arrived. Catering trays lined the kitchen. Martin walked around like he owned oxygen, shaking hands, smiling too wide. He passed my desk and flicked his eyes over me like I was furniture. I watched him walk away and wondered if he could feel it. The ground starting to shift. At 10:36 a.m., Maya appeared at my cube. "Miss Mercer wants to see you," she said, voice flat. My throat went dry. Now. I stood, smoothing my dress, forcing my hands not to tremble. As I followed Maya down the hallway, every step felt louder than it should. We reached an office I'd never been in. Not Martin's glass box. This one had real walls, heavy wood, soundproof. Maya opened the door and motioned me in. Inside, Diane Mercer stood by the window, looking out over the city. She didn't turn when I entered. She said, "Close the door." I did. The click sounded final. For a moment, there was only the hum of distant traffic and the low hiss of the schwack. Then Diane spoke. "Who are you?" Her voice wasn't cruel. It was sharp, like she didn't waste words unless they mattered. I swallowed. Alina Price. Strategy. She finally turned. Her eyes were gray and clear and terrifyingly calm. "Strategy," she repeated, tasting it. "Yet Martin uses you as a coffee runner." Heat rose in my cheeks, but I kept my spine straight. "Yes." Diane stepped closer. Slow. "Why did you message me?" "Because she already knew," I realized. She wanted to see if I'd lie. "Because the Blackgate deal is built on fraud," I said. Diane's gaze didn't blink. "Explain." I opened my laptop, hands steady now that the fear had turned into purpose. I showed her the shell vendors, Orchid Advisory, the routing addresses, the bank overlap. I showed her Martin's approval trail. Then I showed her the emails, the breach, the deliberate delay. Diane watched without reacting. But when the breach email appeared, something changed in the air. Not her face, the temperature. She leaned in, eyes narrowing just slightly. "How long have you had this?" she asked. "Since last night," I said. "The vendor trail I found 2 days ago." "And you didn't tell anyone?" "No," I said carefully, because I needed it to reach the right person. Diane held my gaze for a long beat. Then she said, "Smart." One word. But it hit me like a door opening. She turned and picked up her phone. "Maya," she said, voice calm, "cancel the board packet print run. Now." A pause. Then, "Yes, do it." She ended the call and looked at me again. "Martin thinks he's hosting a board celebration today," she said softly. "He thinks the deal is done." My pulse pounded. Diane walked to her desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a thin folder. She slid it across to me. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. I looked down. It was a list of shareholders, major ones, with contact details. I stared up, confused. Diane's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "It's the real power," she said. "The board is a stage. The shareholders are the crowd. If you want a career to end, you don't yell at the actor." She tapped the folder lightly. "You change what the crowd believes." My breath caught. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. Diane's eyes locked on mine. "I want you to help me call a special shareholder meeting," she said. And I want you to do it before Martin walks into that room at noon thinking he's untouchable. The world narrowed. A special meeting. That was nuclear. Only certain people could trigger it. Unless Diane, as a major shareholder, could. And she was asking me to be the one behind the curtain. My voice came out quiet. He'll know it was me. Diane's gaze was steady. Yes, fear pulsed through me. Then something else. Relief. Because for once, the fear wasn't lonely. It had a purpose. I nodded. Okay, Diane didn't thank me. She didn't comfort me. She just handed me a pen. Then, let's make sure he never calls you an intern again, she said. And in that moment, I understood something. Revenge wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was a woman in a quiet office, holding proof in her hands, choosing not to scream, choosing to sign. At 11:12 a.m., the conference floor smelled like lemon polish and panic. People moved faster than usual, smiling too hard, fixing their collars, checking their reflections in dark phone screens. The board was arriving. That meant Martin would perform. That meant everyone else would clap. I sat in Diane Mercer's office, the door shut, the blinds angled just enough to hide us from the hallway. Diane didn't rush. She never rushed. She moved like time answered to her. Maya stood by the desk with a tablet, calm on the outside, but I could see the tension in her throat every time she swallowed. Diane slid a legal pad toward me. On it, in neat handwriting, were 4 names. 4 shareholders, not board members, owners. The kind of people who didn't argue. They decided. 2 calls you handle, Diane said. 2 I'll handle. My mouth went dry. Diane's eyes didn't soften. Martin doesn't know you. That's an advantage. You'll sound harmless, harmless. A word I'd heard too many times. But now it felt like a weapon. Maya leaned in and placed a phone headset beside my laptop, already connected to a secure line. I'll patch you through, she murmured. Keep it short. Keep it clean. I stared at the first name on the pad. Harold Vance, retired tech founder. Known for being brutal about risk, I swallowed, clicked the headset on, and waited. The line rang twice. Then a voice. Low and sharp, yes? I forced my voice steady, soft, professional. Mr. Vance, my name is Elena Price. I'm calling from Mercer & Wren on behalf of Diane Mercer. This concerns an urgent material risk related to the Blackgate acquisition. Silence. Then, material risk, he repeated, like he was tasting whether it was real. Yes, I said. There is documentation indicating Blackgate concealed a breach and manipulated reporting, and there are shell vendor payments tied to internal leadership. Miss, Mercer is initiating a special shareholder briefing before today's board vote. A breath on the line. Then send me proof. I can't send files directly, I said. But Miss Mercer can provide documentation in a secure shareholder meeting within the hour. We need your attendance to pause approval. Another beat. His voice dropped colder. If this is theater, it's not, I said, and even I heard the steel under my calm. If the acquisition proceeds, exposure could be catastrophic. Lawsuits, regulatory action, reputation damage. The silence stretched. Then he said, where? I exhaled once, carefully. Mercer & Wren, 39th floor. Shareholder conference line. Maya will provide access. Fine, he said. I'll be on. The line clicked dead. My fingers trembled slightly as I removed the headset. Maya's eyes met mine, and for the first time, there was something like respect there. One down, she whispered. The second call was worse. Rena Calder, a private equity heavyweight, the kind of woman who chewed people up and smiled while doing it. When she answered, she didn't say hello. She said, make it fast. I did. She didn't interrupt until I mentioned shell vendors tied to internal leadership. Then she laughed once, short, humorless. Executive stealing while selling dreams, she said. Classic. Her voice turned sharp. If Diane is moving, I'm listening. Text me the meeting time. Maya typed it as I spoke. When the call ended, I realized my palms were damp. Diane, meanwhile, had finished her own calls without raising her voice. She set her phone down like she'd just ordered lunch. How many are in? I asked. Maya checked the tablet. All 4 confirmed. My heart kicked. 4 out of 4. That was enough. Diane looked at me like she was measuring how far I could go without breaking. Good, she said. Now comes the part where Martin walks into the room thinking he's the predator. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. And we remind him he's just meat with a microphone. At 11:41 a.m., Martin strode past Diane's office, laughing with 2 board members, his hand on one man's shoulder like they were lifelong friends. His suit was midnight blue. His tie was the color of blood disguised as silk. He didn't glance our way. He had no idea the floor beneath him was already cracking. Diane waited until his laughter faded, then turned to Maya. Send the notice, she said. Maya hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. Because what we were doing wasn't office politics. It was war. Then she nodded and hit send. The shareholder meeting notice went out with Diane's signature and legal authority. A formal call, a pause on the board's ability to approve the deal until shareholders were briefed on material risk. A red light flashing in the middle of Martin's victory lap. I felt my chest tighten with something close to nausea. What happens when he finds out? I asked quietly. Diane's gaze stayed steady. He will try to bury you, I swallowed. And you? I asked. I will let him try, she said, so we can watch who helps him. That chilled me more than any threat. Because it meant Diane wasn't just ending Martin. She was cleaning the whole company with his blood. At 11:58 a.m., the board gathered in Conference A. I wasn't supposed to be there. But Diane walked in like she owned the walls, and she did. She took her seat at the head of the table, calm, composed, hands folded like she was about to pray. I sat along the side wall with Maya, a notepad in my lap, my face neutral. Martin entered last, carrying confidence like a trophy. He glanced at Diane, smiled too wide. Diane, glad you could join us. Diane didn't smile back. Martin didn't notice, or pretended not to. He clicked the remote, the Blackgate deck, lighting up the screen behind him like a promise. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, today is a major step forward. The door opened. A junior legal associate slipped in, face pale, and whispered into the ear of the board chair. I saw the chair's expression change. Just slightly, like something sour had touched his tongue. The chair cleared his throat. Martin, before you continue, we've received a notice. Martin turned, eyebrows raised, still amused. A notice? The chair's voice grew careful. A special shareholder meeting has been called. Effective immediately. Martin's smile froze. What? He said, too loud. Diane's voice cut through the room, calm as winter. I called it, every head turned to her. Martin stared like he'd been slapped. With respect, he snapped, forcing his voice back under control. This is highly irregular. We're in the middle of a board session, and you were in the middle of buying a company with a concealed breach, Diane replied, not raising her tone at all. The room went dead. Martin's face tightened. That's not true. Diane turned her eyes slightly toward me. My stomach flipped. Then she said, Elena. My name hit the table like a dropped blade. Martin's eyes jerked to me, confusion first, then recognition. Not of my face, of my position. The intern. The coffee runner. I stood slowly because if I moved too fast, it would look like fear. And I was done giving them that. I walked to the screen with my laptop, plugged into the port Maya had quietly prepared earlier. The deck vanished. My files appeared. Vendor records, routing addresses, Orchid advisory. Then the emails. Board optics, delayed breach disclosure, a timeline, a trail, a trap. I spoke in short, clear sentences, like I was reading the weather. Blackgate suffered a breach on April 7th. Their executive team discussed delaying disclosure until after acquisition. Our internal acquisition packet excludes this risk. I clicked. Additionally, Martin Cole approved Shell vendor consulting payments routed through Orchid Advisory and related entities. These entities share banking and mailing details, and the approval bypassed compliance. Martin's voice exploded. This is insane. Diane didn't even look at him. The chair's face had gone gray. A board member whispered, "Is this verified?" I looked at Diane. She nodded once. So I answered, "The documents are internal. The emails are timestamped. Legal can confirm server logs." Martin stepped forward, eyes blazing, voice shaking now. "This is a hit job. By an assistant. By someone who doesn't understand." I turned my head toward him slowly. And for the first time, I looked him in the eyes and let him feel my presence. "I understand," I said quietly. "You thought nobody would look." The room felt smaller. Martin's gaze flicked around, searching for allies. But people weren't meeting his eyes anymore. They were meeting Diane's, because power had shifted, and everyone could smell it. The board chair stood. "This meeting is adjourned. Legal will investigate immediately. The Blackgate vote is suspended." Martin's voice came out broken, furious. "You can't do that." Diane stood too. She faced him like he was a stain on glass. "Oh, Martin," she said softly, "we just did." He lunged one step closer, pointing at me now, eyes wild. "You did this," he hissed. "You little." Maya moved between us before he finished. Security, already alerted, appeared at the door like shadows. Martin stopped, chest heaving, and I saw it, the first true fear in his face. Not fear of embarrassment, fear of consequences. He looked at Diane, voice low, desperate. "We can talk." Privately, Diane's expression didn't move. "No," she said. "We're done talking." Martin's eyes snapped back to me, and in them I saw a promise. This wasn't over. Not for him. He didn't walk out defeated. He walked out plodding, and the moment the doors closed behind him, my knees almost gave. Maya gripped my arm, steadying me. "You okay?" She whispered. I forced air into my lungs. Yeah, but my voice didn't sound like me. Diane watched me, still calm, still unshaken. "You did well," she said, 2 words. But coming from her, it felt like armor. Then she stepped closer and lowered her voice so only I could hear. Now, she said, "You need to understand something." I swallowed. "What?" Diane's eyes were cold and clear. "Martin doesn't lose gracefully." My stomach sank. "He will try to destroy you," she continued. Not with yelling, not with threats. She leaned in slightly. With paperwork, and just like that, I realized the truth. I hadn't ended the story. I'd only ended the first act, because in corporate revenge, the most dangerous part isn't exposing the monster. It's surviving what the monster does when it's cornered. And Martin Cole was cornered. The morning after the board meeting, my access badge didn't work. I stood in the lobby, tapping it again and again, the soft beep mocking me. People streamed past with coffee and purpose, barely noticing me, like I'd already been erased. The security guard finally looked up. "Your badge is under review," he said, apologetic but firm. "HR will contact you. Under review." That's how it started. Not with a firing, with silence. I texted Maya. No reply. I emailed Diane. Auto-response in meetings. By noon, my company email locked me out. By 2, my calendar was empty. By 4, HR finally called. "Hi, Elena," a woman said brightly, like we were old friends. "We're placing you on administrative leave while we investigate concerns about data access and conduct." My throat went tight. "What concerns?" "We'll outline them in writing," she said smoothly. "Please don't contact employees during this time." The call ended, before I could respond. I sat on my couch, staring at the blank TV screen, the city humming outside like nothing had happened. Martin's paperwork revenge had begun. The next day, the emails arrived. Anonymous complaints. Claims I'd accessed files outside my role. That I'd behaved erratically. That I'd created a hostile environment. I read them with shaking hands, each sentence designed not to accuse outright, but to poison, because accusations can be disproven. Doubt just needs to exist. I called a lawyer. He was kind. He was honest. "This is how they do it," he said. "They won't win fast. They'll exhaust you." I hung up and felt something close to despair settle in my chest. I had proof. I had done the right thing. And still, I was the one being erased. 3 days later, Diane finally called. Her voice was calm, as always. "Are you safe?" The question startled me. "Yes." "Why?" "Because Martin is no longer employed here," she said. "And men like him don't accept that quietly." My pulse spiked. He was fired? Resigned, she corrected. Under threat of termination for cause. Legal advised a clean exit. A wave of relief hit me so hard I had to sit down. Then fear followed close behind. "If he's gone," I said slowly, "why am I still under investigation?" Diane didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was lower. "Because Martin didn't act alone, the words landed like ice. There are others," she continued. "People who approved what they shouldn't have. People who benefited." I closed my eyes. "And they're afraid," Diane said. "So they're trying to make you the problem." My chest tightened. "So what do I do?" "Nothing," she said, yet silence stretched between us. Then she added, "Tell me, did you keep copies?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes, good," she said, "because now we finish it properly." 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of waiting, of legal letters, of friends at work going quiet. People who used to smile at me suddenly forgot my name. Isolation is a powerful weapon. Martin understood that. But Diane understood something else. Timing. On a Thursday morning, Mercer and Wren released a statement, not about me, about governance, about irregularities in vendor management, about an internal audit. Names weren't mentioned. But everyone knew. Stock dipped. Press called. Regulators asked questions. And then, quietly, Diane asked me to come in. Not to the office, to her home. It was understated, elegant, no excess. She poured tea herself and slid a folder across the table. Inside were resignation letters. 3 of them. Senior leadership. People I'd never met but whose approvals were on the documents I'd traced. "They chose to leave before this became public," Diane said. "It will protect the company." "And me?" I asked softly. She met my eyes. "That depends on what you want," I swallowed. "I want my name cleared." Diane nodded. "Then you'll need to speak." A week later, Mercer and Wren held an internal town hall. Not live-streamed, not flashy, but mandatory. I sat on the stage beside Diane, my hands folded in my lap, my pulse loud in my ears. The room was full, every face watching. Diane stood first. She spoke about accountability, about culture, about how silence enables harm. Then she turned to me. "Elena Price brought these issues forward," she said clearly. "At personal risk." A murmur moved through the room. I stood. My voice was steady when I spoke, surprising even me. "I didn't come here to be brave," I said. "I came here to work, to do my job." To believe that effort mattered, I paused, letting the words breathe. When I saw something wrong, I didn't know who to tell. I only knew what would happen if I stayed quiet. I looked out at the faces. Some guilty, some relieved, some afraid. "I was called an intern," I continued. "I was told to observe, not speak. But observation is how you learn the truth." The room was silent. When retaliation came, it was quiet, I said. Paperwork. Reviews. Doubt. That's how systems protect themselves. I took a breath. But systems are made of people. And people can choose better. I sat down. Diane returned to the mic. Alina's record has been reviewed, she said. There was no misconduct, no violation. Her leave is ended, effective immediately. A few people clapped, then more. Not thunderous, but real. After the meeting, HR sent an email. A formal apology, a reinstatement, a promotion, strategy manager, new compensation, new reporting line, directly to Diane. I stared at the screen, stunned. That night, I walked home instead of taking a cab. The city felt different, like it knew. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. Then I answered. Martin's voice came through, low and tight. You think you won, he said. I stopped walking. I know I did, I replied. He laughed once. Careful, you made enemies. So did you, I said. Silence. Then this isn't over, I smiled, though he couldn't see it. No, I said, for you it is. I hung up before he could respond. Because the truth was, I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of him, not of the system. I'd seen how power really worked. It wasn't volume, it wasn't swagger, it was patience. Weeks later, Diane invited me into her office. She didn't offer congratulations, she offered an opportunity. I'm stepping back, she said, slowly. I need people who see clearly. She studied me. People who listen. The same word Martin had used against me. Now it felt earned. I want you to help build something better, Diane said. From the inside, I nodded, emotion catching in my throat, because revenge wasn't the ending I expected. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like balance. Martin lost his career. Others lost their power. I gained my voice, and the building didn't collapse. It breathed. That's what they never understood. You don't burn systems to change them. You expose the rot. And let the light do the rest.
And that's the story. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves out there. The world is unpredictable enough.